Today I'm joined by a friend that I got to know a little while ago when collaborating with Clerk at a hackathon for Next.js Conf. Brandon Romano is an engineer at Clerk. I have gotten introduced to him and his work while collaborating for educational content, but also got to know him as a person, as a friend at the hackathon. We got into taking so much photos of the event. Maybe at one point I would also share that with the folks. Seems like we have a kind of similar interest in photography, event photography or portrait photography. Brandon, I'm so glad that you're joined. It's an honor to have you here, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm like very excited to be certainly talking about this topic because I'm like very excited about AI right now. I think the industry is really, really exciting. And yeah, also, we definitely discovered very quickly that we were kindred spirits for sure. You should totally put up some of the photos that we took on the screen. But yeah, no, that was definitely a fun way to
that was
meet
a
you.
fun night. That was a very fun night, and we met a lot of cool people that were attending at the hackathon, building cool stuff, and you could see the theme was AI. It was either an AI native or they just built the whole thing with the AI. So I thought to have you on primarily looking through the lens of somebody that's just working on the back end of an authentication company or technology, but I wanted to know how you as a senior engineer use AI. What's your day-to-day pipeline? What's your workflow? What tools do you use? How do you harness it? How do you see the advancement over the past few months? Where did you start, and how much are you using it now, and where do you seeing it going? So let's just start with like your journey of using AI, and then maybe at the end, I know you have also prepared a project, so we can walk through an actual project, build it from the back end, and also go to the front end and show it end to end, so we can kind of learn more about how you use it day to day.
Yeah, totally. So definitely from like my journey perspective, I think it was probably about like close to the second half of 2024 is when I kind of really picked up, AI tools in seriousness. When GitHub Copilot originally came out, I gave it a shot, and I was actually I was not happy with it. It felt like the way I described it initially was like it was like a junior developer was just like screaming over my shoulder with like the bad ideas constantly. And it was very distracting. But it's really evolved over time. Like I think probably certainly at the start of 2025, the models were getting like really good and the harnesses were getting really, really good. And I gave it another shot, and I was like very impressed. And kind of ever since then, I've kind of been like slowly incorporating it more and more into my workflow. There are, days now where I will not type a single line of code and I delegate almost entirely to AI. It's quite good at working, certainly in existing code bases. I do have to spend a lot of effort kind of like giving it particular directions and saying, okay, go and do this in this particular way. And, it goes in the wrong direction. You need to correct it. It's a thing that, you still actively have to participate in, and you still have to have the underlying fundamental knowledge of what it's actually doing to operate it in its most effective way. But yeah, it's like profoundly changed software development in certainly in the tech industry. I know that, we're probably in a little bit of a bubble in the tech industry. We're very much like at the forefront of adopting these types of tools. But it's certainly in the tech industry, it's every single developer that I'm talking to is very significantly using AI in their workflow. And for very, very large tasks, it's no longer just like write this function. It's like, I'm building this feature, like let's like come up with a plan together, with the AI tool and go and build it, and can be pretty significant. So it's been my journey. It's like it's definitely been a story of using AI in very specific ways, like kind of like a scalpel, and now it's kind of become a bit of like a more of like a sledgehammer that I can swing around. And obviously, with great power comes great responsibility, but it really can get a lot done.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's very similar to my journey, and a lot of people that I talk to, it starts from, I don't know, tab completion with GitHub Copilot. That's just like that. And then maybe testing and trying agents here and there for a function, for a little small change. But then I think what changed it for me was the plan mode in Cursor. If you're using, you can, which it just goes back and forth and it asks questions before implementing, and you could see how it's thinking or what like loopholes and holes in the plan there is, and then it goes and execute it. I think specifically with the Opus 4.5, whomever I'm talking to, they're like, yeah, we were using it. Yes, it was before that we're, we have rules, we have guidelines, we have agent.md, we have harnesses that to just make it produce good work. But seems like everybody with the Opus 4.5 and Cloud Code or Open Code, they're just like trusting it more and more.
Yeah,
but I feel like
it's a very good model. It's definitely, that's when I think a lot of my coworkers were like, oh shit, like things have kind of changed a little bit. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Tanner Lindsley few weeks ago, and he was like the same thing. He was like, he was telling me that he was talking to his team and engineers about kind of the same experience, that them being skeptical in the first, not trying it, or as you mentioned, giving it a very short leash, not letting it just go on its own. But then the 4.5, Opus 4.5 came out, and then he was like, I told them, guys, just give it a try and see, and it just blew up their mind as well. But I think it's also, even if the model is good, I think it is also very important how you're providing context to it. What are your rules? What are your MCPs? Are you providing any skills? Are you providing any guidelines, any best practices there? The more you have these guardrails in place, the way better the quality of what you're getting. And oftentimes when I see people not getting good enough results, I'm like, all right, maybe you're not providing good enough context or rules or skills, or what is in your agent.md file. Sometimes it's just accessing old documentation and whatnot, but there are ways that you can make that better. And I think this is the new area of learning what everybody else is doing, like yourself or other engineers in the industry, and try to replicate and kind of establish best practices on how to use this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, context is very much key. It's like, it is only going to be as good as the information that you give it, right? It's really good at, taking a bunch of information and processing it and coming up with, a reasonably good answer to whatever question you propose it. But yeah, if you don't give it any context, if you don't give it those guardrails, it's likely not going to do the thing that you want it to do, because with all software engineering, there's a million ways to do things, right? So which one of those ways, if you don't tell it which one of those ways to do, the thing that you want it to do, you're just going to get one of those ways. And, maybe you might disagree with it. And if you disagree with it, you're going to have a bad experience with AI. So yeah, really, it's definitely about the context that you provide it. And, the tooling is getting really good. Like, as you mentioned, there's all these, context markdown files that you can have inside of your repo, but also too, just like even just the editors, I think today make it super easy to provide that context. Like very often when I'm giving a prompt, what I'll do is I'll say, you need to do this particular thing. And then I'll, I think it's command, it's muscle memory. So I don't even know the memory. It's like Command L or something like that, where I could say like, this reference this part of the code and do this. And I can give it very, very specific directions. And I can kind of like embed the context of the very disparate parts of my code base and kind of give it how I want it to do it. And it is very much, it definitely improves the output when you give it that right level of context.
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with an existing code base, what you just mentioned is key. You're like, okay, I want to build this feature, and this is how I write my functions. This is how I write my endpoints. This is how I don't know, do this a specific thing, go look at this and then implement it here, which is, I guess, very good at just doing that, versus for a new project where you're just like, there's no code reference or the way that you prefer. You just have to provide more context or rules and guidelines and guardrails for it to do it. That's actually very interesting, because I was talking to somebody yesterday with a CTO of a software company up here in Toronto, Canada, and they're like, our code base is like about 1 million lines of code, and it's just like, I guess C++ or something. It's like a ERP management, like it's like logistics and inventory management kind of software. And he was like, we haven't had we haven't been comfortable or confident that it understands our code base good enough. And I also mentioned the same things that you said, that you could point it at different, guidelines, and you could create these different, best practices or ways you're just like working, or the architecture of your, software, and then it just continues to produce within that same system.
Yeah, so this is definitely a thing that, so if I were speaking to this person, the advice that I would tell them is that you can give the context of your architecture to, the AI agent. You can write a document yourself, human written. And actually, I have one such document in the code base that I'll pull up later. But basically, all software projects, yes, they're complicated when you look at them from a whole. Of course, it's going to be a million lines of code. But every code base, you can look at it at different resolutions, right? You have the high level architecture and you say, oh, okay, we have these, we have the HTTP layer, and then we have a service layer, and then we have a repository layer, right? So it generally can be kind of described generically, and it's like, here are the way that things are done here. I would say that these agents they're quite bad at coming to those conclusions. I would say generally the big picture stuff, it's hard for it to get the big picture stuff because it isn't going to crunch a million lines of code every single time you send it a prompt, unless you want to use 100 million tokens every single time you send a prompt in. So you need to be able to guide it in such a way where you can give it that high level contextual information about what are the steps, what are the layers in my application that I need to look at whenever I make a change. And that generally will help, and you can provide that in kind of exactly like an agents.md file, or you can just have an architecture.md file, and whenever you're performing a change where you're like, I think it needs this, you can link it to that inside of the prompt and provide that context.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Do you want to continue by actually diving in and walking, as you're explaining how we were setting up this project and different files, guidelines, and whatever, and I'll just jump in and interrupt you if I had any questions. Otherwise, I'll just let you take over.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Let me share my screen here. So I have created let me share my screen first. Allow to share the entire screen. Share the entire screen. Okay, cool. So as I had mentioned, I've created just a fake project, just so we can kind of go through, and I want to, show some real concrete examples of going and running some prompts myself, because I think seeing is believing with these types of things. So the conflated example that I have put together is I'm going to be opening up a cat cafe with my cat. My cat's name is Luna. And I need a system to manage tracking cats, tracking people that see them. There's going to be some adoption applications. That's the goal of this cat cafe, that we get cats adopted. So to manage all of this, I'm going to create a system to manage the cats, the customers, the reservations, and the adoption applications. And then hopefully, they're approved and then they become owners. So in this, I'll build a backend, and that's going to be the context. So you can let me know if I veer off in a particular direction and you have any questions about particular things, because I very much have the curse of knowledge on these types of things. So I will probably glaze over something that's really complicated underneath of the hood, and so feel free to ask any questions at any point. So I've set up a project initially with some boilerplate and a little bit of work I've put into this, just because it would be extremely boring to set up a project initially. But so specifically, I will say though about the project setting up process is, so if you are working in a code base, AI works better in an existing code base because it can infer what your opinions are about how things are structured, and it doesn't have to make as many decisions, right? So in the process of setting up your code base, you actually want to, how I mentioned, there's kind of the scalpel and then the sledgehammer. You want to actually, when you're setting up your code base, you do want to think of it like it's a scalpel operation, because you're making pretty consequential architectural decisions that any future AI prompts will assume are codified inside of your code base. So if I make some bad decisions up front about how this thing is structured, it's going to be poorly structured forever. So when you're setting up the project, you actually want to kind of like, apply your knowledge that you have already gained as a developer. And if you have to actually go in and type some code yourself, it's not a bad thing. AI really gets its power once it's kind of working within an existing code base. Like you can totally spin up a new code base and it can make reasonable decisions, but just make sure you review them and you agree that this is the right architecture and setup for your project. So I'm gonna walk through very quickly some of the boilerplate and the stuff that I have set up. So as I mentioned, I'm going to build an API that's going to manage this. Later on, we're going to...
Brandon.
Yeah.
Brandon, can you make the screen a tad bit bigger, like zoom in a little bit so that, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to jump through and just kind of walk through some of the boilerplate here. As I mentioned, so I'm building an API. So this API is really, really simple in terms of like its overall architecture. It's just a Postgres database, and it's going to be a Go application that's going to be the code that's going to run it. So in it, I've set up some very simple Docker setup, so I can go and spin up the application really easily. And as well, I have like a source directory, and I have stubbed out the server. So I have got this server abstraction where I can go and say, here are my routes, and I can plug in those routes into my server, and then go and build the services that go and contact the repositories, which go and fetch the data from the database. So that's from a high level. That's kind of the setup of this project. So what I figured would be useful, what would be helpful, is I can kind of just like walk through building some features inside of this, and I'm going to start kind of small, and then I'm going to kind of grow to giving it more and more responsibility.
Sounds good.
So I think the first place that I'm going to go, so I've already built this endpoint to create a new cat, and I've already built an endpoint to go and fetch a cat. And I did this because I wanted to be involved in this process and give the code base an example of like, here's how things ought to be done inside of this code base. So now AI can reference these other things when it's going and building new endpoints, and it can use this as context. So I'm going to start really, really small. So I want to build the endpoint where I can go and fetch all of the cats that are available for adoption, or just all of the cats in general. So the first thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to go and into my cat repository file. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to go into my cat repository. So the repository is the layer in my application where I am contacting the database, and I'm going and say, this is where I'll write my SQL queries, and where I'll go and say, give me all of the cats, right? So if I'm, not so trusting of AI quite yet, I might only want to give just a single function level of responsibility, right? So I might want to just go and say, I might want to stub out the actual function signature, right? So function r cats repository, not create color. I want this to be, let's call this fetch cats, right? And this should return an array of models cat or an error, right? So I'm still very much human involvement. So what I can do here, and also too, I'm using Cursor. I recommend Cursor as a initial tool if you're getting started with AI. It's a very similar experience to how you maybe used to write code prior to using AI. There's obviously a million different tools that you can use. Cursor is quite good for this. So in Cursor, what I can go and do is I can just go and say I can press what did I press? It's muscle memory. So I think it's Command L. Yeah, Command L. And then what I do is I provide the line by line context inside of my chat. So, and I can go and basically go and say, implement this function. I want to be able to fetch all of my cats from my database. I have a create cats table. So I have a specific thing inside of the cats table called an owner ID, which is basically this is like this cat has been adopted if they have an owner. So I want to be able to fetch cats as well that are available adoption. So I want to be able to fetch cats who are available for adoption, which is determined by the fact that they don't have an owner. Yeah, let's go. Let's see what that goes and does. So I've provided it the signature. I'm not giving it a lot of responsibility. I'm just going and saying, build this repository function, and we'll see how it does. So I think right now you probably see that Cursor is pulling in some context. It's like, okay, let's go and understand what the cats model is like. I think it reached into the create cats table to see what the schema is, to make sure that it can run that query correctly. So it's kind of like right now it's in its context gathering phase to be able to execute, this type of query. And so now we are building this fetch cats query. So we're going to let it do its thing, and we'll review it. Okay, let us see how it did. Okay, so fetch cats. So there's a few options. Yep, it has the available for adoption option, which I can pass in. Optionally filters which cats are returned. Pass nil for ops to fetch all cats, or set available for option to filter availability. True, no owner, false, has owner. Cool, and it allows you to also to not fetch that. So here's my base query. It goes and says if it's available for adoption, so it's doing what I want it to do here, and it's going and querying that. It's scanning the rows of the database into the actual cat model, and it's returning the cats. So cool. So this did what I wanted it to do. I didn't give it a lot of responsibility, right? So if we look inside of our, what did it actually go and do? It just modified this single file, and it just did this. So I don't have to give AI a lot of trust, because it's very easy for me to go and validate that this is the thing that I wanted it to do. So generally, if you're getting started with AI or you're not using, AI workflows currently, this is the where I would say start. Start with a very small amount of responsibility, because it's easy to verify. It allows you to build up your trust that AI is kind of pretty good and can do the thing that you want it to do. And it kind of allows you to still remain in really, really tight control over everything. So this is kind of the first piece of the demo, is just building this one particular function. So I'm going to commit this. And fetch cats function. All right, we're just pushing the main today for now. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the start of it. But what I'm actually after is I'm actually trying to fully build this endpoint. So I've gained a little bit of trust that the AI did the thing that I wanted it to do. So I'm going to now just tell it to build this endpoint. All right, so I'm just going to say, build this endpoint, use the fetch cats, repository function to perform the underlying query. I'm going to give it a little bit more context, because I know I've used AI enough to know that it's going to try to implement pagination, because this is generally how it goes and does it, because that's best practice. We're not worrying about best practice today. So I'm going to say, don't worry about pagination. You can just return all of the cats that match for now. Okay, so now we're giving it a little bit more responsibility. And we are just telling it to build the entire function. And this is going to require a little bit. It's going to have to build inside of my application. So it's the HTTP layer, and then there's a service layer, and then there's a repository layer that goes and sends a request to the database. So it's going to have to go kind of up and down the stack quite a bit to be able to successfully build this endpoint. It's going to have to register the endpoint to the router, so it can actually go and handle it. Shooting available option or filter, otherwise returning all cats. Cool. It seems to be doing what we want it to be doing. All right, let us review it really quickly. So I'm oddly enough, I do not use the review function. It's just like not part of my workflow. The way that I still use Git and like Git diffs to manage how things have changed. So let us review this really quickly. So I'm going to start with the router. This is going to be the most simple. So okay, so it registered the cats endpoint. So get cats list. So I'm going to go to the cats handler and see how it's handling that. List handles get cats. List cats optional query available for adoption. True. It accepts true or accepts one. It goes and sends that to the list service, which takes in the available for adoption, which then goes and queries from the repository fetch cats. So cool. So this again did what I wanted it to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and commit this. You know what? Actually, before I do that, there's another general piece of advice that I have for anytime you're integrating AI into your workflow. I very much think that the need of having automated tests inside of your code base has increased, and it has become more important for two reasons. One, because you want to make sure that the contracts remain stable and a future AI prompt doesn't break anything. But two, when you actually have support for you have automated tests inside of your code base, I'm prompting to make a change inside of my my cursor window here, and I can go and say, hey, make this change. It can actually go and run the automated tests inside of this context window, and it can go and verify itself that it did the thing correctly. So one additional thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have this write some tests. Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to say, can you write some tests? And I already have a test file here inside of my service test. So can you write some tests for the fetch all cats functionality in the service test file?
So what I'm understanding from your process so far, just comparing it with less tightly controlled way of writing, which sometimes I do, or maybe it happens more so in the front end. You're now writing the backend, API endpoints, registering services, and repository. I feel like you started small, but you're tightly in control of reviewing every step of the way, so you just don't let it off leash. And then you're writing tests so to make sure not only you're reviewing it, but also tests are coming in as you're building this for your backend.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. And so, one of the really great things about that test part is so you can see it right here. It's popped up. It's like, okay, so it just wrote those tests. And now it's like, I want to run those tests. So it can run those tests and it run it in Sandbox, and it gets the output of those tests and it goes and sees the result. Let's see. Did we run into an issue? Exceeded. So, okay. So I think that it found, so it found a bug in the test that it had just wrote, because it was able to run it and actually execute that code. So it's going to rerun those tests and make sure that it did what it wanted to do, and it did it. So the process of me going and saying, now write tests for the thing that you just did, it gives it a little bit of reality. It forces it to actually execute the code. It forces it to write a test with what its expectations are for its behavior. And then now I've got a test there that if I make a change in the future, it can also modify the test and verify its contract. So your general summary of my process is kind of correct. It's so I kind of start with a shorter leash, and I kind of give it more and more and more and more. I would say professionally, I have reached the point where I'm not really doing. There's some scenarios where I go and say, okay, do this very specific, tightly controlled thing. But I would say more often than not, I've learned I can pretty safely give it a pretty large leash in the code bases in which I operate professionally. So I, for the most part, I'm I'm probably about at the level of the prompting that I just provided, where I'm like, you build this endpoint, here's what you need to do, and I provide it like the product opinions that I want it to provide, and it can go and infer from the rest of the code base of how what I'm asking for it fits into the code base. And I always add tests because it gives it a little bit of more contact with reality. Okay, so let's just go ahead. Let's assume now that everything is right. So we're going to fully add the fetch all cats endpoint, and then I probably would also test this locally myself. So I'm going to just like spin this up very quickly. I have I've ran this locally, so I think I have at least one cat in my database. So now I should be able to just go and say fetch cats, and cool, it returns an array of all of the cats inside of a database, of which I only have one right now. Let me make another one for my other cat, Ray, and she is a tortie. Let's create a cat for Ray. They're littermates, so they actually have the same birthday. So now when I fetch all the cats, I get both Luna and Ray.
Didn't know you're a cat person.
Oh, I'm a cat person. I can show you photos after. Maybe you could put some up on the screen. No, but yeah, no, I'm a cat person for sure. Also, too, how's the size of the screen? It's feeling like really zoomed in for me, but I want to make sure it's good for.
I think it's good. It's good. Okay, I know it makes it hard for you to actually see what you're doing because it's so big. But on my end, it's very good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I do know it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask a side question here, and that was I realized you're still using the agent in the agent mode, not the plan mode, and also you're not like selecting any specific model. Is it that like for the start or when you're tightly focusing or controlling what it is producing, you're less worried about like what model or what mode? Is that intentional, or like what is how sensitive you are to those kind of different models?
Yeah. So I am sensitive to these models professionally, right? So I'm asking of these models right now is actually really, really lightweight. This is a really small code base. The questions that I'm asking it are really small. So I just have it on auto mode right now. So auto mode is basically, it'll like pick the appropriate model. I don't know how that actually works underneath of the hood, but it's generally good. So it's that. I'm on my personal license right now, so I have $20 worth of credits per month. So it's just like, I would say it's better in terms of like if you're trying to optimize a $20 per month cursor license. I tend to do auto. But yes, so professionally, I mean, honestly, I'm almost always using Opus 4.5. There's really rare scenarios where I will actually deviate from that. So honestly, like I just like hard code this. It's just always Opus 4.5.
I see. Okay.
Opus 4.6 did actually come out this week.
Yes.
I gave it a spin for one day, and I've actually switched back to Opus 4.5.
Really?
Yeah. I have found I encountered this, so it was having a hallucination, and I could not convince it out of this hallucination. It was basically assuming that there was this bug with this underlying library that I was using, and it did not exist. I was like, no, the bug doesn't exist. Like, write a test proving that this bug exists, and it couldn't write a test, and it's like, yeah, but the bug still exists. And I was in Opus 4.5, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of losing my mind right here. So I switched back to, and this was I used it for just one day. And then I switched back to Opus 4.5, and it immediately was like, oh yeah, you're right. Yep, I can see from the test that the thing that I was previously saying was not true. So that was my experience with it. It's probably just like a one-off thing, but yeah, I'm still on Opus 4.5. I'll probably give it another spin this week and see how it is. But that was my initial experience with it.
Yeah, there seems to be like a kind of have like two different sides of how people are finding 4.6. Some are just like what you said, staying with the 4.5, not really surprised by 4.6, or like the people who are, I see it on Twitter, they're like, okay, what have you done with the 4.6 that's just like blew your socks off, or how is it different? So it seems like the 4.5 is still kind of the safe zone and trusted model for.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like, so the jump from pre-Opus 4.5 to Opus 4.5 was like, holy shit. The jump from Opus 4.5 to Opus 4.6 so far has been like, beyond that one negative experience that I had with it, it hasn't felt like profoundly different. Again, maybe it is contextual to the code bases in which I'm operating. And maybe there's other scenarios which it's just like much better. But yeah, that was basically my experience with it. It wasn't significantly improved, so I'm still on Opus 4.5.
Okay. And when you're using these models, are you like professionally using it within Cursor, or do you use like Cloud Code to just like a terminal based?
It depends on the task. So I still do like Cursor. I like Cursor because it still gives me that like interface. I've been coding. Well, I used to write code like we used to, and like by hand. I like Cursor because it gives me a similar experience that I'm used to, which is probably, this is like a very much like a legacy developer opinion. So I can still go in, I could jump into files, I can say really specifically highlight code, say, oh, I want you to do this very specific thing. My prompts are really, really specific often because I have opinions and I want those opinions to be reflected in the output, right? I like to have the code that the AI writes virtually be identical to the code that I would write. I like to look at it and say, yep, that's how I would have written it. And I like that to kind of be the standard of the quality of the code that is output when I'm using AI.
Makes sense.
I think that is it's not necessary in the same way, and it's still a thing that I'm getting used to, but it's like AI, there's in the old world, you used to encounter things where you're like, oh, there's this issue, it's not really great, let's like put it on the backlog, and you like never would get to it. But in the new world, you're like, just fire off an agent, man, it'll fix it. It'll improve the thing that you wanted to do. And so for those scenarios, it's like that's when I'm using more like Claude is like when I want to have like an agent. I used to fully operate inside of my terminal, so I'm a big Vim user. I use like tmux, so I just like spin up a new tmux pane and fire off an agent and let it go to town. And it's generally quite good at that. So I would say professionally, I would say it's more varied than just Cursor. There's times though, but I would say probably Cursor is my daily driver, right? Because it gives me that experience that I'm used to. Maybe I'll shake that when I'm like, I'm not really doing any, jumping in and editing things myself, and I'll just fully switch over to Claude Code. But yeah, that's generally my experience. And then so to go back on a question that you had asked earlier, oh man, I'm going to give you such a fun time in the editing room, by the way. Like you're going to have to cut this down in a fun way, I presume, unless you want this to be a full hour. Sorry. So to go back to, you asked a question about plan mode. So I do use plan mode. I haven't reached that yet inside of my, so I've reached plan mode when I am not confident that it's going to be able to come up with the right plan in the first shot, right? So the thing that I just asked it of, I know it's going to be able to do it because you gain an intuition of what AI can do the more that you use it, right? And so my intuition of this code base is I probably don't need to use plan. Maybe we will. We'll do a plan. We'll do a plan thing at the end. We'll give it a really big. I'm basically going to tell it build the rest of this API right at the very end because we're not going to be able to step through every single endpoint. We'll go through a plan mode and we'll make sure that is this going about it the right way. So we will use that. And yeah, I use plan mode when I don't trust that it's going to come up with a good plan. And I want to see what its plan is before it goes and executes. But for a lot of tasks, it's like, I know it's going to do this right because I've given it a reasonable enough scope and it's going to be able to execute based off my prompt alone. And worst case scenario, it does it wrong. I click reject and then I go into plan mode. So yeah, plan mode is a really valuable tool. Another workflow that one of my colleagues just introduced me to is rather than actually using plan mode, create a file for a plan and actually use the agent mode and have it write the plan to the file. And that makes it easier where you can jump in and you can actually go and edit that file. Plan mode is like to edit a plan. I've found it's a little bit more clunky. I have to prompt it in a particular way to go and edit that plan. But having an actual file is really nice because you can actually, if you decide you want to, you can keep that as an artifact and actually commit that plan so people can understand the context and the reasoning behind your decisions in the future. I think this is going to be I think that committing the context and the reasoning and kind of some artifact of the prompts, I think is going to be a thing that is going to occur in the future of AI native companies. Like, I think it's going to be like, yeah, like write this PRD for what the feature that you want to build out, and work with AI to build out that PRD, and then point AI to that PRD and say, okay, now go and build it, and then also to committing that PRD because it's this really useful artifact of like, oh yeah, here's the rationale behind all of my decisions. Because sometimes the rationale behind your decisions it's lost in this context thread, and it's maybe not reflected inside of your code base.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it. My takeaway from what you said is two things. One, once you start building different features inside of a code base, you develop this intuition on what the agent can do, what they're good at, what they're not. So you know where you can trust it and whatnot. And the second thing is what you mentioned about like this PRD document, that you create this instead of like using to plan mode. Maybe use the agent, build that PRD, go in and just make it as tight as you want, then point the LLM at it and see like, this is the context, go build this now. I think I've tried it a couple of times, and I think that's a better way of using a kind of established plan rather than just using the plan mode.
Yeah. So anyways, it's also too like, so I think that like this video is going to be stale in 2 months because it's like the way in which we are using AI is changing so drastically. Like, I add some new tool to my workflow or add a new way that I'm using AI every single week, it feels like. So it's like it's in every regard, it's software development accelerated, right? The history of writing code has always been, I've got to learn a new framework, I've got to learn a new language, I've got to learn a new thing. You always had to learn, but it was like, the cycle was like a year. And the world that we're in now, the cycle is like, it's like every single week, it's like, oh my God, what is Claudebot? Like, oh, it's not Claudebot any, like, it's like, anyways, there's this really, really fast iteration that's happening right now, which is like, I think if you have the right approach and philosophies, like you very much, if you go into, this has always been true, if you go into and you're a software engineer, you want to go into software and you want to write code, you have to have a learning mindset the entire time throughout your career. There has not been a month in my career where I have not encountered a problem where I had to learn a drastically new thing to be able to solve whatever problem I'm solving, or, the world has changed and now we're using this new framework. You always constantly have to learn. I think that has accelerated more. So you really have to very much accept, like, I don't know what I don't know. And you need to have to kind of really, really be willing to constantly iterate and constantly like learn new things. And it's just more accelerated. And that's true for everything about AI. It's just more accelerated. It's more of the same, just accelerated.
Yeah, that's so true. It's maybe harder to keep up at the speed at the speed at which it's changing, but it's at the very core, you're learning, problem solving with new tools now.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay, I want to do a plan mode now, just so we can kind of like walk through that workflow, and then we can talk. I mean, I could build out a UI so we can look at the UI and just give it once. Maybe when we're talking, I'll give it a prompt. Okay, now build a UI that interacts with this API, and we'll see how that works. All right, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna give it a plan mode, and I'm gonna say. Let me close everything here to make it nice and clean. So let me just add this check mark here just so it knows. Okay, so I'm gonna use this same thread because it's probably got some good context inside of it. So okay, so I now want you to build all outstanding endpoints as described in the README file are not yet implemented. Actually, that's what I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to give it more. I have a tendency to really, really write a lot in my prompts, but you often would be surprised. And you know what? Hold on. I'm going to stop this really quickly. We're going to use Opus 4.5. Add models. Let me just add Opus 4.5 really quickly. We could pretend that we recorded this video before Opus 4. No, I was talking about Opus 4.6. All right. Opus 4.5 brain mode. So we're pulling out the big guns here, right? We're asking it a really big task. So we want to use a really smart model, and we did with the brain icon, which is thinking, which I think that's model. I think that's the way in which cursor actually provides the context and it operates. I think that's a harness function and not like a different model. So cool. All right, so Opus 4.5, go ahead and build it. Okay, cool. While this is working, we could probably talk about other things. So yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask is, like, now we are doing that same kind of idea where that your README file is like a PRD document. It's just like what I want to build it, and it has enough context in what has already been done, so you can go and check those references and then kind of build the rest. And we're also using the plan mode, so it's just like doubled up the layer of planning with a PRD and also plan mode in cursor here. I also see like there's an architecture.md file in your source code. Is there any other context you're providing to the LLM?
So in this code base, only the architecture.md file. So I think it, I don't even know if it is reading from this file in this thread. I bet it encountered this. But basically, so basically what this architecture.md file is what I was kind of describing earlier. It's like I'm providing like the high level architecture of how I want this API to be structured. And so specifically this API, it's like layered architecture. It's like, at my lowest level, I've got my database that stores data. Then I've got the repository layer, which is the abstraction that defines how you interface with it. Then I have my service layer, which can provide additional functionality on top of that. And then the HTTP layer, which is ultimately what the end consumer of this API is going to be interfacing with. So I have some high level architectural, here are the layers. And also too, for what it's worth, this file, I gave it the high level context written in really sloppy English, and I had AI write this, right? And I verified it. I made a few edits, made sure that it was correct. But it was able to kind of actually go and write this itself. So you don't have to put a lot of effort into these files, but they're actually really helpful because what you can do is, again, like mentioning kind of like how you knew somebody who has like a 1 million line code base or whatever. It's like you don't want the agent to have to do that every single time, go and read the entire code base to figure out, okay, what's the architecture of this thing? You kind of can provide these like summarized bits of context. You can do the work up front, provide that summary, and then drop that summary somewhere. And then it's, a useful bit of context that can be provided to use in like other future prompts. You could use that in your agents.md file, which I believe is automatically pulled into basically every prompt context inside of Cursor. Or you can have kind of more one-off specific things where you're like, there's a specific, I want to pull this in because it's relevant. And you can kind of have different markdown files throughout your code base.
Yeah, I really like this idea of, because as you mentioned, agents.md is just automatically pulled in. So if you just bloat that context, is not necessarily always good. But if you're having multiple different files and put a reference inside of your agents.md to say, hey, if you want to learn about architecture, here's where it lives. So it doesn't, it pulls it as it needs. So this is how I do TypeScript, or these are my types. These are my, different layers. And you have like these different multiple files, but which all of them are referenced in your agents.md. So it's just best of both worlds. You're not bloating your context, but you're also giving it access to specific markdown files when it needs to pull from them.
Cool. Yeah, that's a smart idea. I think there's repos at work where we have setups like this. I haven't set that up in my personal projects. I totally should, because it's like, yeah, because I think it's probably a reflection of how I actually do a lot of prompting. I like to participate. You don't see me do a lot of prompting like this, where I'm like, just do the thing. I'm like, do the thing in this particular way. As such, I often don't find myself needing to have context be automatically filled, because I am often the one that's providing the context. I think this is totally like an old way of operating, and it's like I'm definitely shaking it off, and I'm switching into trusting the AI agents more and more to go and say, things like, kicking off background agents and stuff like that. That feels like it feels like a Hail Mary sometimes when you're like, can you try to do this thing? I'm not going to even be participate, just like submit a PR once you're done. That's definitely kind of like the next layer for sure. Okay, but it's got a plan. So I think let's review this plan really quickly before we continue, and then we can press build, and then we can go back to chatting. Okay, so implement all the outstanding endpoints. Okay, so there's 14 outstanding endpoints across 4 resource types. Here's the architecture pattern. Great. Yep, list all customers, delete customer. Looks good. Delete. Okay, update cat, delete a cat. Yeah, cool. Okay, it appears this isn't a super complicated code base, so I think it came to a pretty good conclusion on how it should go and build these things. This is another very small thing. But so one thing that I did, if you're building a backend API, a lot of your product decisions come out when you're building out the database schema. And then everything else on top of that is just, you could largely describe it as boilerplate. So I build my schemas, like I'm writing my database migrations myself still. Like sometimes I write a prompt to make it like easier here and there. But there's a lot of product decisions that come, right? So for example, I've got reservations. I have reservations where it's like every cat can only have one reservation per hour, and every reservation is on the hour, right? These are product decisions that AI can actually go and look at my database schema and go and say, oh, okay, I understand this product decision, and actually design the correct API to satisfy your requirements. So I still build my migrations, and I still define the underlying database models, because when you're building an API, you very often are able to it's able to infer these things and build it correctly from that.
True.
Okay, cool. All right, so now we're building an entire API, and then after this too, I can send off another prompt and say, just build a UI that goes and queries from this, and we'll see how it does. Cool. Okay. While this is going, we'll let this just go and chat more.
I think this idea that you mentioned, starting from your database schema as the foundational level for what everything else is just kind of build on top of, it makes a lot of sense. You can maybe collaborate with AI to build that, really go back and forth, but that's where you need to probably spend the most amount of time, thinking about the use case or the business or the service layer or whatever it is that you're building, and then going back into your data schemas. I think everything else just really sits on that foundation.
Yeah, exactly. This is how it's always been, right? It's everything. I very much like. I have the philosophy: your database is your application, because it's the thing that breathes life into your application. It's the thing that persists from time to time. So it's like, it's a really consequential thing, and a lot of the product decisions that you make come from this. So it's definitely a great place to, like, if you're going to be involved and you're building a backend, be involved when you're designing out your schemas. The APIs, okay, you can go and do this. You could just have cursor, send a prompt, build all these endpoints. It'll probably do a reasonable job. So it's still doing this, but yeah. So this is definitely a great place to, if you're gonna participate, make sure you don't skimp out on this. Make sure that this is in the right way that you want it to be.
Now, I know at some point we're going to also use coding review agents and services to also look at what we have produced from the back end to the front end as well. Maybe while this is building, we can also talk about that part as well.
Yeah, totally. So this is definitely one part of the stack that is the AI stack that is very, I think, very important. So one of the downsides about, AI written code is it can sometimes have bugs. Like this is just kind of like the reality. It can introduce bugs into your code base, and that is, if you're running like a production grade application, that can be a big problem. So I use at work and also too personally, I use a tool called CodeRabbit, which is basically a tool that will automatically review your code when you submit a PR to GitHub. This will be a great. We'll make a branch and we'll submit a PR and we'll let CodeRabbit run, because we just gave AI like a lot of responsibility in this PR. Like build this whole thing. So we'll see maybe if CodeRabbit can catch anything that could be improved. But yeah, it's a really, really useful part. Like especially so if you're at a company you haven't adopted AI yet, this is a great place to adopt it, because it's not going to introduce new bugs into your code base. It's going to prevent bugs. Because I think that a lot of the reservation behind where some companies haven't quite introduced AI into their workflow is because of this resistance, of some nervousness of like, well, if I give up, this responsibility to the robots, like what if they make a mistake? Like how will they, who's responsible for that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that concern is it's actually the opposite with like an AI code review tool. It's like, no, it's reviewing your code, and it's frighteningly good. Actually, it's way better at reviewing code than I am personally. Like I can review code from a design, how you've made your high level decisions. But yeah, like line by line code reviewing, like catching like, oh, you've got a one-off error here, or like, oh, you're using this API incorrectly or something. I'm quite bad at, because it just requires like such a lot of effort. Okay, It's asking to run some tests here, so I'm going to let it run some tests. But yeah, so we will submit this through a PR, and I have on this repo, I have CodeRabbit wired up. So we'll see what it can do.
Beautiful.
Okay, cool. It says build it. We're not going to review it. We're in, ourselves. We're not going to review it. Okay, keep all. Yeah, it got. So see, look at that. Key business rules implemented. So as I had mentioned, it's important to write inside of your database schema. A lot of your you make a lot of the product decisions in the business rules. This was like a business rule decision that I had written into my schema, and it was able to infer this and apply that. Mm-hmm. So cool. So we're gonna add this. Oh, we're gonna go to a branch. We're just gonna call this full API. All right, let's just add. Okay. Adds the full API. Now adds full API. Okay, so right. Cool. So let's go over to the repo here. Let me move this over and pull this over here by itself. And let me close this down. Okay, cool. So let's go over to the repo here and let's submit a pull request here. This is exactly the same workflow that you would normally use on a team. So I'm going to submit this pull request here. And look, yeah, this is a lot of code. That if I submitted a PR like this to one of my coworkers, they would be like, "Can you please break this down into multiple PRs because it's so big?" But now because we have AI code review, the risk of a PR this large has gone down quite a bit, because it's like all those like actual like bugs that like might pop up and might manifest are reduced, because it's going to go and check out the PR. So look, so this cute little rabbit here, goes and says, okay, I'm going to review your PR. It might take a few minutes. It usually doesn't take a few minutes. It's usually actually very quick. And if it catches any issues, it's going to add a comment inside of this PR and say, hey, have you considered this? Maybe, looks like a bug. Hopefully there's actually a bug. If there's not a bug, we can force a bug. I can introduce like a one-off error or something like that. And we'll see if this catches anything.
Catches it. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, no, CodeRabbit is really great. I'm definitely pretty friendly with the team there. It's a super talented team that's building out this product. The thing that's really great about CodeRabbit is they are building out it's like a very focused tool, right? So you have other tools like Cursor has BugBot, and GitHub has their one tool with what is it called? Whatever their code review tool is called. Anyways,
similar functionality.
It's similar functionality. I really like how CodeRabbit is really focused on this one particular business concern. So it actually is like a really solid product. So we'll see if it can prove me right though and catch a bug. Hopefully AI introduced a bug and CodeRabbit can do something. But it's just such a simple thing I'm asking AI to do. Like these endpoints that I'm asking, it's a greenfield code base. It's not a really simple, complicated business concern. Like I'm willing to bet there might be no bugs inside of this PR. So we might have to force one, but we'll see how it goes.
But I like the idea that you mentioned. It's a very good entry point for businesses that are still skeptical to use AI, in that it can also review codes that regular engineers are writing, if anybody is writing code by hand anymore. But it can sit on top of what you're doing at the end of the stack to just review the PR codes, and especially when there's like big enough changes. This goes line by line, and the level of detail that it can have the review on your code base. Usually no human being does that level of code reviews. It's just more so high level, or the PR needs to be so small that can be manageable to review it, or it's just like very high level. But this thing can just go inside. How long does it usually take?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, how long would it usually take to kind of review a...
Yeah, so this is a bigger PR. So this might take 5 minutes. But so it's certainly going to be way faster than a human can get to actually go and review your PR. So one additional thing that I'll like to say about this is kind of to add on to what you've said. This is an additive thing to a human review, right? If you're working on a team, you still probably do want a human review to approve before, you go and say, okay, let's merge this in. That's certainly what we do at Clerk. We don't go and say, oh, okay, let's go and merge this in just because CodeRabbit thought it was good. It's a fully additive thing that can catch things that the human might not catch. And kind of as you mentioned, it does that line by line. It's very distrustful of your code. It doesn't, like when a human's reviewing your code, I would say you often kind of take like, I trust that this person is using these interfaces correctly. Like maybe that's like maybe the wrong posture to take, but it's like, if you get a 1900 line, no, like it's basically a 2000 line to code PR, you're going to have to skim to some extent on some things. Like you're not going to be able to review every single line, be like, oh yeah, how does this specific function work? And you have to jump and say, oh, how does this function work? But CodeRabbit goes and does that. It will actually trace basically every function call that you have, and it will be like, oh yeah, you're using this API correctly, or oh no, you're using this API incorrectly. It's definitely like an additive thing, right? Don't treat it as like it's a replacement for human reviews. Like I think that makes people, especially teams who are nervous about AI in general, that's not the goal. That's not the goal of a tool like this. The tool like this is like to help you catch additional things, and this tool does help you catch bugs from production. Like there are actual bugs that like I've gotten human approvals, and it goes and says, oh, there's an issue, and it catches a thing. Like this happens quite often. It's a really, really invaluable part of our process. Like I'm a huge fan of CodeRabbit.
Beautiful. Yeah, they're they're kindly sponsoring this video as well. So there's a link down in the description if anyone wants to check them out. We're going to have hopefully more content about how to integrate this into your workflow and use it, maybe with Brandon in future again, but definitely check them out.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we just got the response here from the CodeRabbit review, and okay, it found a few things. So let's see what it found. So a non-atomic multi-write. So I think that basically we're not doing something inside of a transaction here. So if for whatever reason I think it appears to be in the adoption service. Maybe this is like when it's like when the adoption thing is approved, and at the same time, presumably we're supposed to transfer the owner of the cat to the person. This can fail, leaving a cat in limbo, which would be so sad. They would be marked as adopted but not have an owner. So this is a major issue. I would actually go and say, oh, okay, let's go and fix this. Let's see here. So birth date clearing is silently ignored. So yeah, here's probably a pretty legitimate issue. And then here's another one. Let's see what this is. Struct comment misleads about null. Yeah, okay. So like it needs a little bit more like clarifying comments. So here's one last thing that I'll show. I'm not going to fix all of these because, this is not a real code base. This is just a fun code base, but like these are actual real things that you would want to fix if you were in a real code base, because even though the issues that you think that case will never happen, like, a transaction, do we actually really need a transaction? What are the chances that the database fails on the second thing? When you're operating at scale in a real code base and you have 10,000 requests per second to your API, edge cases happen all the time, so you would actually want to fix this. So here's one of the great things about CodeRabbit. So I'm using Cursor. CodeRabbit provides a prompt that I can go over to Cursor, and let's see. Oh, here we are. I can go over to Cursor, so I can just go and say, copy this prompt right here, and I can go and just drop this in here. I'm not even going to review it, and let's see what happens.
I really like that feature. So it plugged out the issue, gave you a prompt, copy pasted in your agent. It just points it at the place, goes and fixes that with enough context.
Yeah, and then we'll see. I think it's probably going to be able to fix it. I have a way to create a transaction inside of this code base.
One thing I want to ask while this is doing, like how sensitive are you in checking your current context window? I know Cursor has this thing that you could turn on that it shows how much of the context it has already used. Like there's like a little radar there. Do you check that? Are you worried about like if you're blowing out the context, or because you just keep pasting it in the same kind of dialogue that you have because it has relevant information in what it has already done? Do you ever start new chats, or if yes, at what point?
Yeah, so I usually create a new chat every time I move into a new problem, right? So it's almost like one-to-one. We use Linear for our issue tracking system. It's almost one-to-one when I'm working on build this particular feature and we have a Linear ticket for it. I try to keep the same chat window because there's usually relevant context in either my prompts or what it has fetched before. So I'm usually not too terribly concerned about it. I do keep an eye on like what my costs are inside of Clerk. Like I can access my dashboard. The ROI on any given prompt for my business it's not. I never encounter a scenario where it's like, oh my God, I'm like spending too much on tokens. So it's not a thing that I super concern myself with. But I do sometimes want to clear the context because I've moved on to a new problem and I don't want it to get confused that it's still working on the same problem. Sometimes I have had that happen where I moved on to a new problem and I haven't changed the window because I forgot to change the window. Specifically because we are just like working on, like we're like building the API is like I would say what the task is, like the initial build out of the API. I haven't changed the window because I think there's probably valuable stuff up there.
Yes, makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's see what it went and did. So I think now it's making it's beginning a transaction. and it's committing the transaction at the end. Cool. So let's go and add this. Fix atomic transaction issue. I'm just going to say fix transaction issue. Look at me worrying about my commit messages on a project that does not matter. I cannot train it out of myself. Okay. Okay, so one of the great things about CodeRabbit as well is it's like, okay, cool, you have this issue. CodeRabbit's going to see that new commit come through. It's going to say, oh, you fixed that issue, and it will resolve this conversation. Just like if you had a human reviewer submit a PR and they say, I want you to fix X, X, and X, you submit some commits, you re-request a review. Usually the person who submitted the concerns is going to say, yep, you addressed my issue, I'm going to resolve this comment. So it's exactly the same flow in CodeRabbit as well. So the great thing is that you do not have to learn how to use CodeRabbit. So look, it just resolved it. Addressed in commit this, and you can go and look. Okay, here's where it was addressed. So that's the great thing. You do not have to learn how to use a tool like this. It's the same exact interface if you were dealing with a human reviewer on your PR, which pretty much every developer, they know that workflow. They know how it works. And one more thing I'll provide, because CodeRabbit has a lot of features, and this is a feature that I also like. I'm just going to respond to CodeRabbit in natural English. There's a bunch of things that you can do. So I can respond in natural English and go and say, let me provide you some more context, and it'll go and re-review with that context. I can go and say, I disagree with this, and it will go and say, it'll reconsider based off of your prompt effectively. You could also do another thing where CodeRabbit has this thing called learnings, where basically you provide some feedback on a PR, on an issue that it had brought up. And you can say, oh, this is actually not a thing. Here's some context of why. So what it goes and does is it goes and takes that and it goes and say, oh, okay, you've actually taught me a new thing about your code base. I'm going to file that away so I don't bring up this category of issue that is actually maybe not a problem again. So I'm going to say on this one, I'm just going to say, I'm not concerned about this issue. This is a simple pet project and a case that does not need to be handled. Okay. And then so you give it a minute, CodeRabbit will respond with the power of editing, hopefully. Sorry, I'm giving you a humongous editing job. Or you could just make this a 3-hour video if you want.
Yeah, it will be, it's just like we're walking end to end from an idea, designing architecture and code reviews. It's super fun and useful for anyone who wants to use these tools. Yeah. Cool. So CodeRabbit has saw this issue come up. It's got the little eyes emojis, so it's probably thinking about it. We'll see how it responds. I don't know if GitHub will. Yeah, look at this. Understood. I'll make a note of that for future reviews, right? All right.
So it has this like memory, and in the future, if a similar category of issue comes up, it won't bring it up. Usually there's scenarios where it will actually, there's times where CodeRabbit provides feedback and it's like it's missing context because it's not inside of the context of the PR, or it didn't build that context. It's missing some context. You could provide some context, and it goes and stores that in its bank, is basically. So that's basically it. I think I'm gonna merge this PR. I'm happy with my review. I fixed the only thing that I was like really concerned about. So I'm gonna merge this PR. If I was in a company, I'd also wait for a human review. But here we're just rocking it solo. So look at that. Luna's Cat Cafe, the API is done.
Beautiful.
If we have the time, the last thing I want to do is I want to build a front end, and I'm just going to tell Cursor, build a front end for this and see how it goes. I think that would be fun. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
We can see it come to life.
Yeah. I'm gonna spin up my backend so it has it available to it itself. I don't know if it's going to attempt to query it, but I'm gonna have it running. All right. So this is a. Do I want to make a new? No, I don't want to make a new thread because there's useful context about the endpoints inside of this thread. So okay, so we've got the API. I'm going to make a new folder. Oops. I'm going to make a new folder called frontend. Do you have a framework of choice? What do you usually do in your front-end work in?
Next.js.
Next.js? Cool. Let's use Next.js.
Recently have been dabbling into Tanstack Start.
Cool. Yeah, we like Tanstack. We like Next.js. It's getting a little rusty. Oops, not LS. I'm not in my terminal. Okay, so let me run a command here. Okay, so let's build a front end for this API in the front end. I think I need to have a file in here for cursor. Yeah, it won't recognize a empty directory. Let's build a front end for this API, and it should be a Next.js project. Okay, so I would say, so the home page should be a list of cats. We should be able to click into a cat and make a reservation to book some time with the cat. There should be an adoption form page where you can submit an adoption request.
You might have been able to infer this from like these fields in the schema, even to say, all right, maybe there's an adoption application here because there is a field for it here.
Yeah, all right. Let's do it. The only direction we'll do is we'll tell it to be a Next.js project. I like that it's Next.js because I know how to operate in Next.js as well. All right, cool. Yeah. You're probably totally right. So let's build a front end. So let's see what does it think that the Luna's Cat Cafe should be. Yeah, I'm famously an over commenter in my code. You don't see that here because AI doesn't over comment. I'm an over commenter in my code, and I'm like an over providing context to prompter in my prompts.
I can tell.
Yeah.
I mean that's how you would get good quality results. I was going to ask if you ever use voice to kind of like whisper to voice to text, but with the amount of references you create, probably it's just easier for you to type because you're just like copy pasting, highlighting, putting that in the content. That would be impossible with the voice thing.
Yeah. So I do not, but I have coworkers who do, and they do really like that because it's like one of my coworkers literally just brought up this semi recently where they were like, I want to be able to work on a thing when I'm like cooking. And, I've got my headphones on that have a microphone. Like, I want to just be able to interact with my AI agent to like continue working on my code base while I'm cooking dinner. And it's like, I mean, that's not a workflow that I myself think will be additive to my life. Like, I do have a pretty good separation. Like, I'm at like a desktop, basically a desktop computer when I'm at work. It's technically a laptop, but I have like a desktop setup. I like I'm at my desk and I'm working, and I'm not at my desk and I'm not working. I think if I started introducing that workflow into my life, that would not be super great. But it's like, I think there's something nice about being able to kick back on your chair and like lean back and just be like, let's work, really relaxation mode. I think there is something to that. So I don't use it, but I have coworkers that use it and coworkers who really like it.
Yeah. I think more also, besides the fact that you can multitask or, I don't know, speak while you're doing other stuff, it is also sometimes that you can speak faster than you can type. I mean, you're pretty quick, but usually humans can speak faster, so you can just get more. And then sometimes these tools like Whisper, they can kind of fix what you're saying, so you can just like blur whatever you want to say, and it just corrects what you wanted to actually say, and it creates a better kind of sentence and prompt, and I have seen that done. But when you're providing references like you are, and copy pasting and lines and at signs and whatnot, you can't. I'm not sure if you can do that with the voice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to bet that like you still direct it in the same way, where you could say, oh yeah, make sure you reference, you know, how I'm using the repository function inside of my cat's repository, right? And it could probably figure out where you're going. Like, but yeah, I'm like I've always been this way. I've always been just like more information is better. And also too, this is a pro tip for those of you who are, you know, adopting AI and in your code base. AI loves comments, just like how humans love comments. AI absolutely loves comments. You're basically providing it inline contextual information when it goes and says, oh, I need to read this file. If you add comments of like the whys and like, why are you doing things? It's like it can gain that context right as it's reading the code. And I've absolutely found that like my crazy over commented code bases, AI works way better. I can provide shorter prompts to it and get the result that I want because it can infer all of the context. So it's like, you know, you're not only just writing comments for humans now. Like comments are really great for AI when you like, hey, I want to provide context, you know, inline every time an AI agent basically runs through this file. It's like add a comment. It's the same exact way you would comment for humans, but it will, you yourself will experience some benefit in a way that you didn't. Look at this. It's totally building it.
Run the build command to test everything is working there.
Yeah. Right. I have a side project which is vibe coded and it's like I'm totally constantly impressed by it. I'm just like, how can it do this? So the API is running on port 8080. So let's go and in another terminal here, let's go cd frontend and npm run dev. Oh, it's just opening in cursor.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so
adoptions. There was that tab of the.
yeah. I did not tell it anything. Okay, so let's go to cats. Let's add a cat. All right, so we've got Luna. She is a tuxedo cat. Let me see if it's sending the it's sending the request here. So just did an options request. Okay, so I'm just gonna. Oh, this is a future birthday. Let's not do a future birthday. Let's say she was just born. Failed to create cat. What's going on here? Node. Failed to create cat. Let me see. Can we inspect in here? I've never used this. No, not components. Yeah, okay, you inspect. So let me look. So network. Let's see what's happening. What? Next.js original. Oh, is this doing a server-side request? Let me see. Failed to create cat. Give me some more information. All right, I'm just gonna say, whenever I attempt to create a cat, it fails to create the cat. Oh, you know what? There might be a CORS issue because it's running options requests. That's all I'm getting. Let's fix this. Let me say, oh my God, give it the context. Give me the context. Why is it not working? Is it okay? Oh, Control L. Sorry, you can edit this shit out. I want to add to chat. All right. I think we are. Okay. So this is an issue. This is an issue with the backend. So the backend, I don't have CORS configured. So it basically, this is like a security thing for those of you who are unfamiliar with CORS. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with CORS because a lot of people run into this problem. Yeah. So I need to open this up.
So your front end is not hosted from the same kind of port that your backend is running. So browsers are like having that issue with the CORS. One thing about Next.js that I find really, really useful, they have this MCP tool called Next Dev Tools. And in Next.js 16, you could just run that. It has like an MCP server that gives your agent a window into the runtime server. So you can read the runtime issues and provide more context. So sometimes you could just type in and say, hey, Next Dev Tools, tell me what's going on. And you can see that there's like 29 issues there. Next is showing on the browser. It actually can read all of those, provide it back to the LLM, and then that just walks through those issues one by one and solves them.
Cool. Okay, we verified it indeed was a CORS issue because now I'm seeing the total cats, the total available for adoption. So let's I don't know, let's mess around with this UI. Let's make a new cat. Let's call him Fubar. And he's just let's say he's an orange cat. And he was born, I don't know, here. Okay. So cool. So we've got Fubar. Let's look at Fubar. Cool, he's available for adoption. No reservations yet. Let's book a reservation with Fubar. Oh, wait, we don't have any customers yet. Let's make a customer. Let's make a customer. Let's call him Ron. He loves cats. Let's go back to Fubar, and let's book a reservation. So Ron just gave us a call, and he said, hey, I'd really like to meet Fubar like ASAP. So it's 11:35 right now. So he's going to be in here by noon. So let's book a reservation. So Ron is going to meet with Fubar. Cool. Let's say they met. So Ron, okay, so no adoptions yet. So, okay, let's say that Ron's really happy he met Fubar. So Ron wants to now adopt Fubar, and he's going to submit an application. And the staff really appreciated how Ron treated Fubar, and they're going to approve the adoption. Unknown cat. Oh, a bug. Let's see though if the adoption actually happened. So total cats. Okay, look at this. Total cats available for adoption too. So Ron has now adopted Fubar. So view details. It doesn't have any details about who the owner is, but that's okay. We don't need that. But so notably though, I know it did the thing because now there's only two that are available for adoption.
Yeah,
cool. It's great. Let's just close that. We're not worried about these issues, and cool. There you go. My cat cafe is ready to open for business.
Live. All right. Beautiful. That was pretty cool. We built it end to end, talking about how you're using AI in different capacities, really tightly controlled small tasks with context, but also using the plan mode, using markdown files for the architecture to giving it more room to go and build stuff based on the context you're providing, on how you're doing things. We looked at your PRs and the code review with CodeRabbit that just goes in and kind of finds issues that you may not have noticed, and then you can chat with CodeRabbit, either provide commits that fixes those issues, it picks up on those, or you can just comment back and say, don't worry about this. That was a very cool part of this whole workflow, that you could just implement AI into whatever it is that you need. To whatever extent you're using AI, you can just use that code review right now. And then at the end, building an Next.js front end for it that just talks to this backend API endpoint.
Yeah. So we did it end to end. That would absolutely have not been possible in a 1 hour meeting to build an entire API with a front end. There's definitely it's like a big unlock for sure. Like obviously, maybe it's a little dubious of how production grade it was because I didn't review any of it, but it's like, it works. It's like you got a proof of concept working. So it's definitely, we're in a new era for sure.
All right, folks. So that was it. If you have any questions, hit me up down in the comments. If there are things that you do in your workflow, let us know, and we would love to hear back from you. And hopefully we'll have Brandon more in future videos, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.